It's been 4 months and the copying process for my textual criticism experiment is finally complete. Woo! Hey everybody, welcome back to the Gospel Training Ground. My name is Ryan Haines and I am here to help you live out your Christian faith in our post-Christian culture. And today I have some super exciting news to share with you. The copying process for my textual criticism experiment is finally complete. All 52 of the manuscripts that I had being copied are finally back in my possession, which means that I have officially begun to start counting the textual variants. And so far I've been able to examine the first 14 sentences in each of the manuscripts, and I already have counted 170 variants in just the first 14 sentences. Like, that's crazy, but it's also really exciting. I have a lot of work to do, but if you want to see some examples of these variants and how I'm going to go about resolving the variants, then definitely subscribe to the channel because I'm going to be posting some more updates in the near future about some of the different variants that I've been discovering in my manuscripts. But in this video, I just wanted to give an overview as to what this experiment is all about and then give you some of the manuscript data that I have in the experiment so you can see what exactly it is that I'm working with as I continue to do this experiment. Now, as many of you know, this experiment is my attempt to help people understand the validity of New Testament textual criticism. And my thesis for this experiment is as follows. I believe that when a document is copied successively through multiple lines of transmission, I can accurately reconstruct the wording of that document using only imperfect copies of that document. That is the official thesis of the textual criticism experiment. Now, the first question that needs to be asked is, what do I mean when I talk about accurately reconstructing the wording of the original? When I speak about accurately reconstructing the wording of the original, I mean that I expect to be able to do one of two things: to either perfectly reconstruct the exact wording of the original with no variation whatsoever, or if there is variation, I expect that the variation in the wording of my document to have no meaningful difference between the wording of the original document. For example, let's say that in the original document there was a sentence that said, Joshua moved to Dallas, Texas after he graduated from college. And let's just say that as I'm working through the manuscripts, I come to the conclusion that that same sentence should read like this: Joshua moved to Dallas, Texas after graduating from college. Now you see that the wording is not exactly the same. Like, for example, in the original it would have TX as the abbreviation for Texas, whereas I actually wrote the word out for Texas. And then the last part of the sentence says after he graduated from college, but then in my version it says graduating from college. But you see that even though the wording is different, there's no actual meaningful difference between the two sentences. So even if my wording is not exactly the same in every way, I still expect to reconstruct it in such a way that there's no difference in the meaning of what I have and what the original has. So now that you understand my thesis, let me show you what information I have to work with from the manuscripts. So what you see up on the screen right now is my textual transmission chart, and the purpose of this chart is to sort of visualize the transmission that this text of the original document went through in terms of the flow of copying that it has gone through. So as you can see, the original document is represented at the top of the chart, and each preceding circle represents a copy that was made of that document, and the lines simply connect the circles, showing the flow of copying from one manuscript to the next. Now notice that the original document was copied 4 times, and each of those copies become the foundation for a different line of transmission, and each of those lines of transmission is unique. If you observe the lines connecting each of the circles, which represent the manuscripts, you can see that the order of copying in line 1 is different from the order of copying in line 2, which is different from the order of copying in line 3, which is different from line 4. And this was meant to simulate the sort of random copying that the New Testament documents went through. And you'll also notice that each line of transmission has gone through 5 phases of copying. So ultimately, the original document went through 5 different phases of copying in 4 different lines of transmission, producing a grand total of 52 copies of that original document. Now you're probably wondering why some of these circles are black, some of these circles are white, and some of these circles are half black and half white. Well, when it comes to the New Testament, we have what you could consider imperfect or incomplete lines of transmission, meaning we do not have every copy of the New Testament that has ever been made. So our knowledge of the New Testament text is based on only a portion of the total copies that have ever been produced. And furthermore, the surviving copies that we do have of the New Testament, some are fragmentary, meaning they're not full or complete copies of the New Testament. So in this chart, the black circles represent manuscripts that I have discarded. Like I actually lit them on fire, they're gone, they do not exist, all their information has been lost, and I will never know what they said. The circles that are half black and half white represent fragmentary manuscripts that I have damaged by cutting them, stabbing them, ripping them, and just putting holes in them and things like that. So I only have portions of these manuscripts left remaining, so I don't have all the information that was originally contained in those fragmentary manuscripts. And if you want to see some footage of me destroying these manuscripts, then you need to subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for the final update video I'm going to do at the end, because I'm going to include some funny footage from all that stuff. And then finally, the white circles that you see in the chart represent full and complete manuscripts that I'm going to be using in their entirety. Now, as you look at this chart, I want you to recognize something very, very important. The closer you get back to the original, the less information you have. While at the same time, the further you get away from the original, the more information that you do have. So consider the chart. Notice that I discarded and destroyed every single manuscript from phase 1. And if you look at phase 2, I only have 6 fragmentary manuscripts. I don't actually get my first full copy of this document until the 3rd phase of copying. And then as I go on into phase 4, I have most of the copies that were made, and then ultimately in phase 5, I have all of the copies that were made intact. Now, why did I do it this way? Because this is the same situation that New Testament scholars are in when they work with the text from the New Testament. The earlier they go back, the less information they have, and they certainly don't have any direct copies of the original document, and neither do I in this experiment. I got rid of everything from phase 1. And so the amount of information that I have increases as time goes on in the copying process, and that is similar to what we have going on with the New Testament manuscripts as well. But now let me just change this up a little bit and give you a numerical analysis of the textual transmission chart. So, like I said, I had a total of 52 copies produced of this original document. Of those 52 copies, 17 of those are missing. Those are the ones that were blacked out. I totally eliminated them. They don't exist anymore. 12 of those copies are fragmentary. Those are the ones that I damaged and destroyed, ripped in half, ripped into pieces and stuff, so they don't contain the entirety of the information that they originally had. And so I'm considering those just as an estimate of containing only maybe 50% of the information, though some might have a little more or a little less than that. 23 of those 52 copies are complete, meaning they have 100% of the information that was originally contained in them. Now, when we put all that together, I have 23 complete manuscripts, 12 fragmentary manuscripts. Those fragmentary ones I'm counting as about half a manuscript each. Okay, so when I add that together, I have about the information of 29 complete manuscripts, give or take. That means that I'm only using 55.8% of the total information produced in the experiment. So really, I'm only going to be using just barely over half of all the information that was produced in this experiment. That's not a ton of information. But now let me break this down even further, and let's look at how that 55.8% of information that I'm using is actually broken up into the different phases of copying. So feel free to pause the screen and kind of let these numbers sink in at any point you want to. But let's just look at this here. The first column that you have is referring to what percentage of information I have available to me in each of the phases. The second column in the middle here shows how much of the information that I'm using as I reconstruct the original document is coming from each phase, and the third column here shows how much of the information that's available to me comes from each column in light of the total information that was produced. So if we just look here in the first column, in the first phase of copying, all the manuscripts were destroyed, so I have 0% of the information available to me from that first phase. In the second phase of copying, I have 25% of the information available, third phase, it's 50%. The fourth phase, it's 66.7%. And in the final fifth phase, it's 100% of the information available to me. So you can see that I have more information as the copying process goes on. And now when we look at the middle column, this shows how, of all the information that I have at my disposal, this is how it's broken up into each phase. So in the first phase, all the manuscripts are destroyed, so I have 0% of the information coming from there. The second phase, I only have a couple fragmentary manuscripts, so I only have 10.3% of information available to me. And then in the third phase, I have 20.7% of my information coming from there. The fourth phase gives me 27.6% of my information, and in the fifth phase, I have the majority of it, with 41.4% of my information coming from that phase alone. And now this third column shows what percentage of information is available to me from each phase in light of the total information that was produced in all 52 manuscripts. So you see in phase 1, again, I have none of that information. In phase 2, I'm only using 5.8% of the total information that was produced in the entire experiment. Phase 3, it's only 11.5% of the total. Phase 4 is 15.4%, and Phase 5 is 23.1% of the total information produced in the experiment. So as you can see, the further back that you go in the transmission process and the closer you get back to the original, the less information that I have to work with. And this is the exact same situation that New Testament scholars are in as they deal with the New Testament. It's not necessarily these same numbers, because they have no way of knowing these exact numbers, because they don't know exactly how many copies of the New Testament were produced throughout history, but the similarity is there, that the earlier or that the further back you go, the less information you have. Now you're probably thinking, Ryan, this is crazy. There's no way you're going to be able to accurately reconstruct the original document, especially when you're only using about half of the information produced in this copying process, and that most of that information is coming from much later on in the transmission process. Well, that's what the experiment's all about. We're going to see if I can do it. I'm convinced that I can, even with the limited information that I have. So if you're interested in seeing how this all turns out, here's what you can do. First thing is you can subscribe to the YouTube channel and stay tuned for more update videos that will be coming in the near future. But also, because there's been so much interest generated around this experiment, I started an email list on my website at thegospeltrainingground.com. The link for that is in the description box below. But if you go to the website, you can sign up for the email list, and that way you'll get all of the Textual Criticism Experiment update videos sent directly to your inbox, and that way you'll know that you won't miss any of them. I will definitely have more update videos coming in the near future, but in the meantime, you can check out the website and see all the different resources I have on there about the reliability of Scripture, and you can also just check out some of the other videos I have here on my YouTube channel, like the Textual Criticism playlist, and other videos I have on theology and apologetics and how to share your faith with others. But hey, until next time, just keep learning and keep sharing your faith. Bye-bye.